Hello viewers, my name is Adam and this is Seeking Me Productions, bring you another ranking video. In this video I'll be discussing my favorite superhero video games. We have some video games discussions on this channel, the two Insomniac Spider-Man games, well technically three if you want to count the Miles Morales' complete whole game, and Guardians of the Galaxy game. You might see those two on those lists in the area, but superheroes can be a very big and successful video games and within that industry. Some very reach high. Some of them even innovate games to come. And so you'll be looking forward to what is on this list as well when we discuss that matter. But unfortunately, as many, unfortunately, quite often, superhero games can be announced but also canceled, sometimes within the span of the same year, and that's a very frustrating reality. So for the ones that were able to release over the course of many decades now, these are among my favorites. And before we continue on, we're close to 1,000 subscribers. Please like, share, subscribe, comment below, and please, we want to express our unique perspective on all things media and explore the many capabilities of what can be done on our end through either of content creation. So before we really get into gears with this ranking favorite list, some honorable mentions. The X-Men are like among the few superhero IPs that actually have plenty of video games. None of them will be on this list, unfortunately. Some they have all going to be featured in some of the lists as in this favorite video. But one particular, X-Men Legends. The first one that I played way back, about, I think it was about 20 years now. But it was an action RPG, very playable, many characters, many factions of the X-Men world. I'm still waiting for a much more of a AAA experience for the X-Men property going forward. Marvel Nemesis, there's going to be a lot of fighting games, like a few fighting games actually be discussed in this video. Marvel Nemesis was a somewhat experimental type. It's a 3D fighter, play with a few of the Marvel characters, but it was like the Rise of the Marvel is subtitle Rise of the Imperfects, so it had also original characters as well. It was like an EA partnership that actually, ironically, like somewhat of the success of this game was actually in the making of actual bigger fighting game that was in development, that was announced. It was a kind of a big deal when it was in development, but unfortunately, like so many, it was canceled. So Marvel Nemesis, it has a blueprint for an even more solid 3D fighter, in my opinion. And speaking of fighters, Injustice. Now, Injustice is not on this list because, personally for me, the story rubbed me the wrong way. It's basically a much more toned down version of Mortal Kombat because from the same developers. Not the first time they tackled DC themselves with Mortal Kombat vs. DC Universe. I would like to see if they can experiment not on a 2D fighting plane, but more of a wider experience. Going on with the actual list now, starting off with something probably that people will probably think about, Batman Begins. Not the first Marvel of the movie-inspired game that you'll see here, but Batman Begins, personally, I was actually a little bit enjoyed. There was some unique mechanic called the fear gauge that was very fun to utilize in that game. It's mostly a stealth aspect, and I can see how the stealth elements in this Batman Begins video game was actually helped influence the Arkham games later on down the line. And the Batmobile chases them alone were very fun as well. Next up will be Marvel Ultimate Alliance. Now, like I said, X-Men Legends, the same developer, or publisher, Activision, I think the same developer, made this even more expansive with the blueprint they made for X-Men Legends. This time you're able to control more of the Marvel vast universe. They did had a sequel, Marvel Ultimate Alliance 2, that actually was inspired by the Civil War storyline in the comics. This one's was slightly inspired by the Siege storyline that preceded the Civil War. So playing those back to back was kind of similar of a fuller experience. But being able to play as so many Marvel characters outright with their unique capabilities in one game in such an RPG like somewhat adventure setting, it was a worth time when that came out. Next on the list is Beautiful Joe. This list will contain video games from the original to many developers and publishers. Beautiful Joe is from Capcom, from the same person who developed and directed many of the Devil May Cry and Resident Evil games. It's a fast-paced beat 'em up, like straight like single linear story of original character with such very 2000s like attitude. The cartoonish graphics and storyline is well over the top, but the mix between speed and slow motion effects with the hand-to-hand combat is very holds up till this day. It has this movie aesthetic that also helps benefits with the style. I really hope that Capcom, since they're going back on some properties that that they've been neglecting, I can see them doing a reboot of this series if they wanted to. Guardians of the Galaxy. Now, this game had the unfortunate timing of releasing when Square Enix, the publisher of their Avengers game, came out earlier. This one barely has anything to do with that game because it's a completely different experience from another developer, even though Square Enix is the one who published it. This one takes inspiration of sorts from the James Gunn's movies for the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but it tells its own story and universe about these characters. The only disappointment about the fact that you're only playing as Star-Lord, but the storyline, narratively speaking, is exceeds a bit of what James Gunn did in those video games, in those movies, while also because it's slightly more faithful towards the some of the characters that he failed on, particularly Gamora and Drax on this front, and also Adam Warlock. Again, this is told from Star-Lord's perspective, and the gameplay, and through the gameplay, but the interactivity amongst the characters, that camaraderie, the team, the somewhat leadership like gameplay, which you can ban the other characters, was a fun experience. But I have a review on this channel, so look at that if you want more of an in-depth discussion on that particular video game. SpiderMan II. SpiderMan II, another movie-inspired video game on this list, possibly the best Marvel movie-inspired video game ever. Kind of like second to Peter Jackson's King Kong. That's another great experience, mind you. But Spider-Man 2 is basically an innovative game in the open world space. When this game came out, closer when the release of Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2, yes, it tells the story of in the movie with Spider-Man and Doc Ock as the villain, main villain. The way it actually expanded upon the world of including all the rest, some other characters in Spider-Man's world, the way they use Black Cat, Mysterio, tell where this game walked so that the Insomniac Spider-Mans can run, and it is still in some way it is dated, especially with the graphics is concerned and some of the gameplay elements. But this is such a very strong impression on what superhero games can be. Marvel versus Capcom 2. Marvel, they are very prolific in developing, or at least producing video games across the spectrum and the industry. Mostly because of the fact that Marvel is not afraid to allow many different developers and publishers to take a chance at adapting for these games. Marvel vs. Capcom 2 is a culmination of a partnership with Capcom, starting with the X-Men and or Punisher and like beat 'em up game and an X-Men Children of the Atom. Marvel vs. Capcom, the gameplay is a fast-paced tag team fighting that has one of the best characters of both ends of the spectrum. The X-Men characters particularly shine here. Spider-Man, Doctor Doom. There's some deep cut characters that you would expect in a Marvel licensed game here that adds to the personality of it. That has such nostalgic times, and recently, at the time of this video, been re-released as part of a Marvel arcade collection through Capcom. So if you wanted to finally check this game out after so many years now, go ahead and check it out. The Incredible Hulk Ultimate Destruction. The Ultimate Destruction, like an original story that's inspired by the comics of an open world game that was clearly the first game of its kind to really embrace the destructive, unapologetic nature of the Hulk on display. Came out in the mid-2000s, but the Hulk, the Abomination's relationship story was particularly a highlight, strong, but come on, man. The open world destructive nature of the Hulk on display throughout the gameplay is really where the game really shines. It's very high on this list. I really hope that they are able to re-release this on a remaster of sorts, because classic games need to have some life many years from now. In the top 3 of my favorite superhero games at the moment, the Insomniac SpiderMan. Yeah, like I said, SpiderMan 2, very influential in the video gaming industry in terms of how it utilizes the comic book property, but also open world. This one took what Spider-Man 2 did and just went home with it. One of the strongest highlights is particularly the story of actually balancing out the Peter Parker and finally grown up adulthood, a fresh reinterpretation of the comic books of Spider-Man 8 years after his debut as this character. Similar to Spider-Man 2, the main villain is also Doc Ock, but like how they interwoven him organically with the Sinister Six later down in the story, the introduction of Mr. Negative, more of a modern superhero villain in Spider-Man's world, getting such a strong spotlight here. But of course, the narrative, emotionally charged story is resonates throughout. It's somewhat inspired by also the Batman Arkham games, and how they were able to, on somewhat of a certain levels of how the free-flowing combat is concerned. But if you are going to do one thing right in a Spider-Man game, it's the swinging. So many hours of just exploring the city, a very dense interpretation of New York City, a fictionalized version of that, with a very many Easter eggs of a vast Marvel universe as well. Really hope that they come around to actually making their own, making their own Avengers games, or just taking on the entire Marvel universe at this moment. Number 2 on this list is the infamous Duology. Now, technically infamous, it's the original game itself from Sony, and it is a very fun open world experience. back in the PS3 era. I say duology despite the fact that this franchise has a third game, Second Son, that I feel as though it's very subpar, like compared to the first two games installment, telling Cole McGrath's story. The way they expanded upon electricity as a superpower, very like really put the high bar in terms of it depicting that in the video game space, as well as other ways. The expansion of Cole's tragic story, mind you, told across these games is there also makes for a very emotional part. The sandbox style, the parkour, and the very vast ways in which you can traverse through the city, the rail lines of basically skateboarding across, also with the innovative way of how they use the karma system, either how they either evolve depending on what type of story direction you want to go. This game also deserves a remaster, possibly a reboot of sorts, because this was one of the best games of that PS3 era that should make a comeback. So as of right now, my favorite game in the superhero genre is Batman Arkham City. This is the second game in the Batman Arkham universe from Rocksteady Games and Warner Brothers Interactive Studios. And I will want to go more in depth with the Arkhamverse in a separate video, possibly down the line, if you want like to hear that discussion. But talk about innovative video games, from the way that the open world space of how Batman traverses through his gliding alone, the highly multi-layered storyline, the rest in peace Kevin Conroy, his reprisal of Batman, best that he's ever done with the character, as well as Mark Hamill's Joker. I like it's a much more mature take on the of what they did with the Batman the Animated Series, with the vast Batman mythology, but they just does it in such a unique way, of which it developed his own world, like his own personality. There are some setbacks that I would like to discuss in a possible other video, but Arkham City by itself, with its devastating story, the handle bosses, or the many or the puzzles that you have to come across, such vast content in it that is still being found till this day. So there you have it. That was my list of my favorite superhero video games as of this moment. Please like, share, subscribe, and comment below. What is your favorite superhero games? What is your discussion about all these video game superhero related cancellations? I really hope that someday Warner Brothers particularly is able to like expand on taking a chance on many developers. There's also content that I also post on other social media outlets of X, Threads, and Instagram. And again, my name is Adam, and this has been a Sikimi production. See ya!